It's called big tech, and they wield a lot of influence and power, not to mention that they have a lot of money. They are household names in which we use their services every day. But they also have a dark side to them. They are using their power to eliminate competition. Hi, I'm theyre. In today's program, we're going to take a look at the dark side of big tech. Coming up in today's program, first, the big tech companies that we will take a look at. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. We'll also take a look at Microsoft. There are other ones, but these four are under our radar in today's program. Then we're going to move on to the consequences of big tech. One of them is what's called market manipulation. That is one of the consequences of the way that big tech is holding power, which leads to total control. As mentioned, market manipulation is one of them. Also, crushing competition. Just a couple things that they're guilty of due to the immense power that they hold. How can they be stopped? Can they be controlled? And finally, it's not just the tech sector. Monopolies are all over the world. Worldwide, 10 corporations, if you can believe that, 10 corporations only control almost all large food and beverage brands. The push to break up big tech companies, Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And before that, Microsoft. There's a feeling that these tech giants are too powerful. But they're also really good for consumers. Big tech has, in some sense, gotten too big, and U.S. politicians are starting to listen. Like former President Donald Trump, the U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, and even the current President Joe Biden.
In conjunction with the America First Policy Institute, I'm filing as the lead class representative a major class action lawsuit against the big tech giants, including Facebook, Google, and Twitter, as well as their CEOs, Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, and Jack Dorsey. Three real nice guys.
One of these five, Microsoft, was the subject of lawsuits.
57.
Another, Google, has been hit by European antitrust regulators for major fines.
Now, for the first time in over a decade, internet users in Europe will have an effective and unbiased choice between Microsoft's Internet Explorer and competing web browsers such as Mozilla, Firefox, Google Chrome, Apple Safari, and Opera.
For starters, big tech companies have been pressuring suppliers and competitors. The tactics have been cruel and inhumane. Some examples: Amazon's price wars against competitors, Apple's management of its own app store, and Facebook's privacy scandals. The story of big tech is incredible when you take a look at the numbers behind these giant conglomerates, from revenues to market share and to staff. You would think that they have been around for a long time, but nothing could be further than that. It's incredible to realize that likes of Facebook, Apple, Google, and Amazon have been around only for 25 years. Now, before that, they did not exist. And before they came into the picture, Microsoft was there. It happened in the 1990s when it entered the market. It was the technology giant at the time, gobbling up huge market share, and like big tech, crushing competition as a result. Its dominance was in computer operating systems. The US federal government sued Microsoft for violating anti-monopoly laws and reached a settlement, which then paved the way for internet companies like Google and Facebook. Now, joining us in this edition of the Q&A, first Q&A, is Kristen Harris. He's the host of a radio show called The Rundown Live. He's also a journalist and researcher and is based out of Milwaukee. Okay, Kristen, welcome. Four technology companies, mainly Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, are known as big tech. We could also talk about Microsoft. And they have created monopolies that is set to control the internet for personal uses like we use for shopping. Now, there's public concern about the power of these big tech companies, that they are manipulating markets and they're crushing competition, which has very much driven the world to be very concerned about this power. How are they driving out and crushing competition, do you think?
Well, I think one of the benefits of the internet is that they can offer technology at a lower price because they cut out the middleman per se in a lot of ways, and the process and way people get their products from the internet, such as you mentioned, Amazon. People can now go on Amazon.com and find anything, any variety or collection of product, as where you're very limited in the brick and mortar store. And with COVID-19 being such a big influencer in the shutting down of businesses, it's really pushed and giving more wealth into these giant online businesses. Now with the internet, anyone could create a business, but you may not be able to offer the price because Amazon has such large purchasing powers. A lot of times these monopolies and cartels are not really the creation of the market, but by the government. For example, like in media is generally owned by 4 or 5 major corporations, but I can't file and get a radio station license. I just start a radio station or start a television station. I need to get approval by the federal government. So when it comes to these issues, a lot of times government is the problem with monopolies. They're the ones that sanction it.
It's time now for our InfoNews section, where we take a look at other economic news from around the world. Now for our first item, we're going to go to China. We're going to take a look at the smartphone news that came out of China, and in regards to Xiaomi. China's Xiaomi has overtaken Apple, so it shows that it's gained market share over Apple. It's become the second biggest smartphone producer to have beaten Apple by 3% in global shipments. Now Samsung has the #1 spot. Xiaomi has the second spot with 7% share. #1 Samsung with 19%, and Apple to have come in third with 14% share of the market. Now moving on to digital currencies, the U.S. seems to have a plan. The U.S. Fed has made an announcement. It said that there is a token that would eliminate Bitcoin. That obviously is something that for the currency market, digital currency market, is something to worry about. Jerome Powell has made that announcement that if the U.S. established a central bank digital token, there would be no need for Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. Cuba, next item, protests that have happened there. They have come out protesting harsh economic conditions due to the U.S., who has had an embargo on Cuba for decades now. Now, the U.S. sanctions has actually cost Cuba quite a bit of money. $800 billion is what some estimates have put it at. And our final item, COVID-19 inequality. The pandemic is still making the situation worse, especially when it comes to this data. Top CEOs to make nearly 300 times more money than the average employees. The Americans for Tax Fairness is saying that we can raise some $4 trillion for vital public services simply by ensuring the rich and corporations begin paying their fair share of taxes. Okay, it's time for a quick break here on Economic Divide. Let's stay right where we are. We'll be right back. It's time now for our in-depth section. Now in this section today, we're going to feature former U.S. presidential candidate and avid anti-big tech opponent, Elizabeth Warren. She was so against them that during the presidential campaign of 2020, it was one of her items which constituted her platform. Now here she is describing what she wants to do towards the breakup of big tech.
Because that opportunity to do what you do best, to come up with a great idea, to work your heart out to make it happen, to be able to compete on a level playing field, is taken away by these platform giants. So my view is break those things apart and we will have a much more competitive, robust market in America. That's how capitalism should work.
Okay. Well, there was also another very important feature to her proposal for the breakup of big tech.
We have to think about competitive markets. That's what my announcement yesterday, my proposal is now, about protecting competitive markets by breaking these giants up.
So strong is her anti-big tech stance there, calling for the breakup of big tech. Now, the heart of her stance is the following. She is saying that promoting competition is very important. It allows new, groundbreaking companies to grow and to thrive. As a result, that pushes everyone in the marketplace to offer better products and to offer better services. She actually posed a question that kind of put things into perspective. And that question is, aren't we all glad that we have the option of using Google instead of being stuck with Bing? Something to think about. Well, according to Team Warren, central to her government is the idea that although consolidation might not have raised prices for certain online services, well, it has helped depress wages. That's one of them. Inflate executive pay. That's another consequence of this. So those are two very important ones, depressing wages and inflating executive pay. And also stifles the rise of new businesses. Well, she then goes on to relate that to America's middle class and wealth inequality, two problems that the U.S. has been experiencing for quite some time. She says that this, in turn, has contributed to the decline of middle class financial security, giving it a rise of income and wealth inequality. So you have these four big tech companies to bring about these four consequences here, or these consequences here. Middle class decline leading to wealth inequality, and then destroying innovation and company startups. Left unchecked, she says concentration will destroy, as I mentioned here, innovation, small companies, and startups. When you take a look at what's happening regarding this, all of this needs to be dissected. So let's bring in Robert Bridge. Robert Bridge is a journalist and political observer. He's also the author of Midnight in the American Empire, How Corporations and Their Political Servants Are Destroying the American Dream, in terms of the book that he has written. Okay, so taking a look at what big tech is doing, you have the destruction of competition or the stifling of competition. You have things that big tech is being accused of, even though they are actually responsible for the creation of jobs. But in terms of the bigger picture, please break this down for us, whether it's good or not, and how they are guilty, especially the way that Elizabeth Warren, the U.S. Senator, has said, so much so that she says that they need to be broken up.
I'd say there is a lot of truth to that. On the one hand, you have the small innovators who, out of their garage or whatever quaint story there may be, they come up with some kind of new technology, new app or whatever. Like, for example, the way Apple computers were invented, for example, Steve Jobs and that whole quaint story. And then what happens is nowadays that these big companies, they just continue to buy up all of these small innovations, small companies, and they bring them all under one umbrella. And although that could be seen as a positive on the one hand, it could stifle growth, it could stifle innovation. They buy out these companies. So on the other hand, there's another aspect of it all, that executive pay. I think this is really where the concern is back in the 1980s, for example, executive pay outpaced the pay of workers by 50 times. And nowadays, that same margin is about close to 200 times greater than the pay of the average worker. So you have that aspect of it. And if you look at, like, for example, what's happening not only in California and Silicon Valley, you have huge amounts of people. It's something that they're trying to conceal, but around Silicon Valley, San Francisco, all these once really beautiful towns and cities, they're being overrun with tent cities, homeless people living out of their cars. San Francisco was once one of the most beautiful cities in the country. Now there are many areas of it that you can't walk down. You got hypodermic needles on the ground and human feces and just everything, and it's unimaginable.
All right, time now for our one-on-one in this segment. Robert Bridge is a journalist and political observer who rejoins us, along with Kristen Harris, who's host of the radio show The Rundown Live. Well, Kristen Harris, let me start with you. The argument is that big tech companies have too much power. They have too much power, it is said, over the economy, over the society, even say over democracy, at least in the U.S. They've bulldozed competition. They have used private information for profit. They have tilted the playing field, so to speak, against it seems like everyone else. But isn't that the case with other industries also? For example, worldwide, there are 10 corporations that's been proven to control almost all large food and beverage brands. That means that these 10 brands control a large portion of the products of the 7.7 billion consumers that the world buys.
Well, again, we're talking, first of all, when we're talking about food, we're talking government regulation that is going to consolidate the amount of people that can have food and competition that there is in the market, because you need to get approval from the FDA. Not saying that our food shouldn't be safe. I'm saying that they can be selective to their lobbyist business partners if they so choose. In the form of social engineering and social media, I think it's a big misconception that these platforms that are free, like Facebook or Twitter, we actually pay them in a form called metadata. If you haven't been noticing, metadata is the new liquid gold. In all reality, we've been paying with our information, our data, and giving it to them for free, while they've been giving us less and less reach as a result. I think freedom of reach is a big thing here in America. The United States has been working hard. The Biden administration is calling, or people from the DNC are calling on the Biden administration to actually, politically correct our text messages. They want to review our text messages. Not only that, the government is working with social media to decide what should be censored and what shouldn't be. Since when is it the government's job to censor and dictate what news the American people can have? It's always the government that seems to be the issue. And the internet, that's why they want to regulate the internet so bad, is so they can control the social engineering. Like I mentioned before, government is the main cause of the monopolies. They're the ones that you have to go and get a federal license to broadcast radio or television on, and they decide who can and who cannot and what information gets out there. The internet is the last form of free market where we can have digital broadcasting, where we can get information out there, and they're salivating, waiting to control that information, because what they want from you is not for you to be a self-thinking, free-thinking individual. They want to control you from the minute that you wake up till you go to bed, so that you buy and purchase the items that they want you to, that they subliminally put in through symbolism, through information, through advertising, through what you see. And they even want to control your thoughts now, saying that you cannot have freedom of thought, that you must think a certain way. So what we're seeing is Silicon Valley using their muscle in collaboration with the current administration to try to social engineer a nation's viewpoint on what is correct and what is not. And there's absolutely an issue there. It's not freedom of speech, it's freedom of reach. So what's the point of having speech if what you say doesn't reach anyone? That's where we're going with a lot of this. And we need to be aware that this is happening, because this isn't just happening in the United States. This is a global phenomenon. If you've ever looked at anything like Google Jigsaw, where they say that they're trying to root out misinformation against an open society, what does open society mean? Well, George Soros described open society at Davos 2017 as global mafia state. I don't know what that means. His words, not mine. But if you're against the open society or global mafia state, then they're going to censor what you say. What it is they're coming after your freedom of speech, not just in the United States, but worldwide, because they're trying to force us into some kind of fully automated luxury communist future that majority of Americans who believe in the freedom of speech, your constitutional rights, would not approve of. But they want to condition us through education, through social media, through what we purchase, through Hollywood, into believing in a certain narrative. And if you don't accept that collectivist view and you want to be an individual, you are the problem.
Wow, interesting thoughts there. Well, Robert Bridge, let me see if you agree with that. I mean, basically, what I'm gathering from what our guest there, Kristen Harris, has stated, is that it's all about control. And that is what monopolies actually do. They are controlling the market. They are very big in the wealth that they accumulate, and then through their subsidiaries or through their corporations, they control the market. The way that our guests talked about how the data on each person is collected in order to have people, when they wake up, start buying their products if they at any time that they can. So it's all about that. And of course, when we talk about the global scene, you have, for example, the 10 brands that I mentioned that control a large portion of the products that 7.7 billion consumers in the world buys. Do you see it that way?
I think when you're comparing the food supply versus the information supply, so to speak, you're comparing apples and oranges there. Although it is disconcerting that only 10 companies, maybe less, control all of the food brands in the world. That's actually quite dangerous, and we're seeing that right now as some parts of the food supply chain are starting to break. You have, for example, that one incident where the Chinese got stuck in the straits, and that just cut off a huge part of the food supply, the global food chain right there. So when you're talking about information, social media, and things like that, that's become like the new town hall, as they call it. This is where people get together and they discuss ideas now. They no longer really meet together at the local church or places like that. They meet together electronically. And when you have only a handful, Google, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, controlling this space, then it's of course extremely dangerous. And we saw that with, although many people of course don't like Donald Trump and they think that he deserves everything he gets, he was completely barred from all social media. So if it can happen to a person like him, an ex-president, then it can really happen to anybody. And now they're even talking about tracing people. For example, there's just a news story out that they want to, the Biden administration, aside from just wanting to go door to door and trying to get people to accept vaccine. Not that there's any problem with that, but some people would look at that as an invasion of their privacy. They also want to start monitoring people's SMS messages, and if anybody is expressing any doubts, for example, about getting the vaccine, then they're going to start. This is the idea, anyways. They're going to start putting fact checkers on there and fact checking people's actual personal communications between other people. So that is, of course, extremely disturbing, and it just shows that the power of these companies to influence the conversation, to shut down the conversation if they don't like what you're saying. On Twitter, I've seen this multiple times, especially people who voice opinions on the right. If their opinions go against the left-wing ideology, then quite often these people are just completely disappeared. they're banned. So they just literally disappear. Like, for example, Alex Jones, he was a very controversial personality, media host, and he literally disappeared. Unless people actually hunt him down on his own website, you don't see him anymore. So this is happening everywhere.
To say that big tech has stifled competition, well, it has. It has taken away creativity. That is also true. And it has been responsible for the closure of many mom and pop stores. That is a whole nother story. However, if you were to weigh, let's say, the positives versus the negatives, well, the verdict is out on whether it should be broken up, as the U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren has stated. But if people like her are calling for the breakup of this monopoly, then why don't they call for the breakup of other monopolies that exist in the U.S. in a whole variety of industries, from clothing to you name it? Because this not only goes against the grains of capitalism, you also have many powerful families with ties to politicians, which makes this an impossibility. The answer? Use big tech to your advantage and beat them at what they're doing. That does it for this edition of the program. Your questions and comments are always welcome. For me, Kavitakwe, it's goodbye until next time.